Today, there is a very real sense of crisis and a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. We don't know what to do. We feel overwhelmed. We feel frustrated. We feel powerless. Part of the reason is because the paradigm we are working with clearly doesn't work, clearly isn't getting us anywhere. And now I'm talking not only to the powers that be, Israel, the United States, the Palestinian Authority. I'm talking about ordinary people who are genuinely committed to peace and justice and reconciliation, who care about Palestinians, but also care about Israeli Jews. For those people, for many years, the solution was two states. We just have a Palestinian state in Gaza, West Bank, and Jerusalem, probably demilitarized, side by the state of Israel. And we don't get too deeply into the ideology or the problems between the two people. We just say, just limit your ideology to one geographic area. Palestinians, limit yourself to 22% of Palestine, bite it, accept it. That's the reality. That's all you're going to get. Stick to it. And Israelis, you can have 78% of Palestine and you have all sorts of guarantees, but please just give up the land that you took in 1967 and there will be land for peace. That was the formula. For many years, that's what everybody worked for. And that's why everybody was so totally crazy with those Israeli settlements that were being built. And everybody kept saying, these are an obstacle to peace. They are illegal. It's 5 minutes before midnight. If this goes on, there will be nothing to negotiate about. For at least 20 years, even longer, we've been hearing that we're just about finished with the two-state solution if this keeps going. But it kept going. So now we are caught in a different situation on the ground. There's over 700,000 Israeli settlers living in the area which is supposed to be a Palestinian state. The Palestinian Authority is desperately trying to pretend that it's a state or a state in the making when everybody can see that they have no authority, no power. They have duties and responsibilities to keep their people in check and to provide them with their needs, but they have no authority at all to do anything. So this requires some new thinking, some out-of-the-box thinking. And perhaps, if nothing else, my little book attempts to urge people to start a different kind of conversation. A conversation that's been stifled by our slavish following of the two-state formula. And I say this as a person who has worked very hard towards the two-state solution. And it collapsed not because the Palestinians didn't want it. The Palestinians were willing to accept it with all its faults, but it has been made totally impractical. We cannot do it anymore. So in my little book, I first describe how we came about to reach this two-state paradigm, how it was systematically and continuously undermined by different Israeli governments from the right and the left, why it is impossible, impractical, and impossible to even think of doing the basic minimum that's required to create a Palestinian state today. And then I say, what do we do now? Once we recognize that the Palestinian state isn't about to be created anytime soon, that the realities on the ground have made such a solution impractical, if it ever was seriously considered, and some people say it never was seriously considered. But if that's the case, where do we go from here? How do we find a new paradigm, a new vision, a new idea that people can gather behind, that people can commit to, that people can work towards even if it's difficult, at least we have a view, we have a vision, we have a target, we have a goal, we know where we're going. And so I did a little thought experiment, I guess you would call it. I said, let's stop with trying to analyze Zionism and Palestinian nationalism. And I know some people want to go into a settler colonial analysis and say this is totally wrong. Israel violates human rights, and it does, violates international law, and it does, creates racism and supremacy, and it does. I said, no, I don't want to go into that type of analysis. I want to try, as an experiment, something different and see what is it that Zionism promises to these people that is so attractive. And can we provide that short of a Jewish state? What is it that Palestinian nationalism offers to the Palestinian people? Why is it that we want a state anyway? And can we get those things without having a Palestinian state? At the beginning, it was like a fanciful experiment. But as I started to look at it, I realized that nationalism, as well as Zionism, pretends to solve a number of problems, real problems that people feel, real needs that people have. So I say nationalism is so attractive because it says we're the boss. If it's my state, if Israel is a Jewish state, as Jewish as France is French, then we Jews determine everything. And we set the rules, and we set the stage, and we own the resources, and we dominate the land, and we dominate everything, because that's how Jews can be safe. That's how Jews can exercise their desire to be a people, to be connected to their history, and to be to defend themselves. And because this is our land, God gave it to us, history, necessity, anti-Semitism, you name it. This is why we need a Jewish state in Eretz Israel, all of Eretz Israel, actually, not just parts of it. And by the same token, for Palestinians, we say Palestine Arabiya, it is Arab. What are you talking about? We've been living here for centuries. We've always lived here. All these foreigners coming from all over the world really don't belong here. We want a state where we can exercise our identity, our language, our culture, where we can be the boss. This is our land. Yes, we may accept people coming in and leave, etc., but it's ours. And what do we want? We want to be free. We want to be democratic. We want empowerment. We want sovereignty. We want to be able to run our affairs. We want self-determination, an expression of peoplehood. And then I say, and I ask the question, can I have all these things without a Palestinian state? Can the Jews have all these things that are promised by Zionism without a Jewish state? And I believe we can. The one thing you cannot have is exclusivity. The one thing you are not allowed to have is to say, this is mine and mine alone. You can say this is mine, but it's also somebody else's. And I tell my Palestinian friends, frankly, you say Palestine Arabiya. Yes, it is. From the river to the sea. Yes, it is. But you realize that half the people living there today are not Arab. And they're not going anywhere. Right or wrong, just or unjust, this has become their home. So can it be your home and theirs as well? And I tell the Israeli Zionists, I'm not talking about the left, and I'm not talking about the anti-Zionist left. I'm talking about regular Israeli Jewish Zionists. I'm saying, you want Israel to be as Jewish as France is French. You want it to be a Jewish state. do you realize that half the people living in the land today are not Jews? And they're going nowhere with every possible advantage in the world, with tremendous power and tremendous military power, with the support of the United States, with control of all the land and its borders, and with the fragmentation of Palestinian society that you've achieved. You've called some of them citizens, but not really full citizens. You've kept some of them in an open air jail in Gaza. You've kept some of them in the West Bank under this crazy Area A, B, and C. And you've kept some of them in Jerusalem who are residents but not citizens. And you've kept the majority of them in exile as refugees. And you've created a different set of rules for each of these groups of fragmented Palestinians. But despite all that, you have failed. Half of them continue to live on the land, continue to consider it their own, continue to dream of genuine freedom and democracy in all this land. So can you have your state when half the people of that state are not Jewish? Can you imagine a state that is both Jewish and Arab? And so I play around with this crazy idea, and I try to address some of the obvious problems with it. And the first problem is demography. Demography says that if I have 51%, I am in charge. I am in control, and I can totally erase, oppress, disenfranchise, even physically eliminate the others, consider them as nothing. This is a false view, actually, of both of what democracy is and a false view of reality. Reality is that, yes, numbers count and they are important in a democracy, but they're not the only factor in a democratic society. If you provide sufficient guarantees, legal and other guarantees for equality and for peaceful gathering and organizing, you will find that some, even minorities, end up being very powerful. And some majorities end up being less than powerful in a state which is majority of that particular ethnicity or racial or ethnic group or even religion. So I talk a little bit about the demographic demon. I also try to address the security, the fears of many of my Israeli and Zionist friends. Tell me, we have a bad history. We have a bad experience with laws and constitutions and majorities who have not given us our rights. The only way we can have our rights is if we are dominant, if we are the majority. So I try to address their fears. I try to address their concerns. And this is what I put in the book, actually. When I wrote the book, I didn't really spend much time on how do we go from here to there, although I have a small chapter on that at the end. But there are some specific things that can be done to move towards that vision. Yeah, but we need to at least be willing to enter into a new conversation. And it's a difficult conversation. For Palestinians, it's very difficult to somehow accept a very unjust reality that this other group came from all over the world and they are now living here and they are even dominant here. For us to accept that reality, that Palestine is not only Arab, but both Arab and Jewish, is painful and difficult. But also, I think for many Israeli Jews who think that they've won, they have all the power in the world, for them to say that we're not alone here, there's another people, and this is their land as much as it is ours. and they love it as much as we love it. And they are entitled to freedom and equality and justice in this land. So this is what the book is all about. And this is what I invite the conversation to be all about. I'm not saying that my vision is the only one or even the best one, but I am saying we have to start thinking in that direction. We have to start thinking of how can we best listen to the other and incorporate them within our worldview, instead of always saying, no, I am right and everybody else is wrong. I respect those who insist on their ideology. I respect them, but they are dooming their people to eternal enmity, where every little advance by the other side is a loss to us, and every little gain we make is a loss and a threat and a danger to them. I want to live in a world where I don't have to worry about every new immigrant that comes, and where the Israelis don't have to worry about every new baby that's born to Palestinian mothers. I want to live in a world where Palestinians can dream and can exercise their right to return, not just Jews. I mean, if they think they have a right after 2,000 years to come back, why don't we have the right when many of us were actually born there? When we have pictures and we have keys to the houses where we were kicked out of. I'm saying, how can we both live together? This is the challenge, and this is my attempt at addressing it. And I'm curious to see the conversation continue. I will limit myself here and stop. And I'm curious to see how Peled and others are going to react to this idea. Thank you.